YouTube. It's Anthony here with another video game review. And the game I'm reviewing this time is Luminous Arc for Nintendo DS. And now this is a game I finished recently. Recently I beat it. And it was a game that I purchased, used. I got a complete copy even though it was kind of pricey because I was looking recently for JRPGs on the DS to play because I really didn't have much of a DS collection until just like the last month, honestly. And I got this game because I was desperate to have some JRPGs on that system, and even though the reviews for it were sort of lukewarm, I still went ahead and did it because the little bit I did see from the game when I looked it up looked promising to me. It looked like stuff that I'd enjoy, so I got it, I played it, and here's my review. So starting with the story, this is one of the things that I thought was going to be an issue with this game because lots of reviewers who've critiqued this game have said that it has kind of a very stereotyped, cliche, black and white sort of story, you know, stuff that's really typical in JRPGs, really run-of-the-mill, nothing unique, just very predictable. But I have to say I definitely disagree with that sentiment because, you know, I played through the whole thing and I thought the story was at least average for an RPG, if not a bit above average, and it did a pretty good job of graying the line, I thought, between like good and bad characters. Like, I thought there was good complexity in the perspectives you're presented with, and if you spend time and effort looking into the lore built into this game world and the different characters and why they feel the way they feel about things, I think you can find out that the story is not quite so black and white and not quite so simple as some harsh reviews have said it is in this game. And there were actually also a couple really good surprises that generally took me pretty off guard. Things I didn't necessarily see coming in the beginning of the game. You know, I never would have predicted the game to be where it was 15 hours in back at the beginning of the game. I never would have predicted some of the turns that it made. So it was just overall a very good story, I thought. It doesn't feel like it's a rip-off necessarily of any other JRPG I've played. I thought it was pretty unique and just pretty good. One of the surprises was actually really good. Like, one of them I really liked and really made me smile when I got to that point in the story, but I won't say anything since I don't want to spoil it. The main thing I'll say about the story is it progresses well. It progresses very well, very smoothly, no bad pacing issues. It always makes sense where things go from plot point to plot point, I thought. So we move right along into characters now. Now here's one thing I do agree with a few other reviewers about, and that is the fact that there's a weak main protagonist, unfortunately. The main character who you sort of see all the events through doesn't have a real strong personality, kind of bland. There's nothing really outstanding about him, nothing really of note. Nothing too off-putting, but just a little boring, honestly. So that was a little bit of a shame. And also another critique is, by the time the whole game was said and done, I would say the villains weren't the strongest either. There were a few villainous characters I liked and thought were interesting or amusing, but all in all, not a real strong villain cast, just kind of average. But getting past those two gripes, I have to say, by and large, the cast of characters in Luminous Arc is outstandingly good. Like, you eventually come into contact with 15 playable characters, so a big group of characters you have to choose from in terms of who you want to play with, and you know, how much you want to look into their backstories and whatnot. And yeah, some of these characters, quite a few of them, just have really great, strong personalities. They're distinctive. They have very amusing chemistry and interactions. It was always a lot of fun to read through the dialogue scenes. So I guess what I want to say about characters is, despite the few weak ones, it was a really strong cast of characters. I definitely found a lot of characters that I liked quite a bit. Getting into gameplay next. So I'll just go top to bottom here. The gameplay takes you around a pretty linear overworld exploration. You kind of just progress from point to point on an overworld, and it's sort of, you know, you're on train tracks. You're not exploring freely. You're just visiting different locations. And in that sense, and in the sense of the way the plot unfolds, it's pretty linear. There's never really a huge reason to go back and visit places you've been before, and you're generally just going from one place to the next place to the next place, and in a given town you'll have a few options of things to do, like you can talk to your party members, or shop for weapons, new equipment, armor, that sort of thing. Or you can, typically, if you're in the right place to advance the story, there'll be an option to advance the story, which just simply allows the plot to keep unfolding, and whatever event or battle you're supposed to face next will just unfold as you scroll through the text. And so you're pretty much never going to have to worry about getting stuck in this game. It's not a game you can get stuck in, because it clearly shows on the overworld what's the next location you're supposed to go to, and once you get there, it's very simple to just proceed right along. So yeah, it's a bad thing if you really like exploration and you really want that from a game, but it's also a good thing if you don't like getting stuck. Me, I like exploration, but for me, this game had enough other good qualities and in its storytelling that I didn't mind the linearity in this case. Yeah, one thing I'll just note, it's a lot of dialogue. It's very dialogue heavy, and at times when you're scrolling through these scenes of dialogue, it'll feel a little bit like a visual novel. And again, that's kind of subjective. Could be a good or bad thing depending on who you are. The other thing about gameplay I really have to touch on, and this is like probably the highlight of the whole game, is the battle system. And the battle system in Luminous Arc is very refined, very smooth. There's not a lot bad I can say about it, honestly. It's like a grid-based strategy RPG tactical RPG style. This is actually only the second game with that style battle system I've played. The first was Rhapsody on the PlayStation. And this one has definitely a more in-depth battle system than that, a more satisfying one for sure. And it just has a lot of very convenient features to it. Anytime you're in battle, you'll have the option to bring up, for example, turn order. It'll bring up the turn order of, you know, your party members and your enemies on the map, and so you'll be able to sort of predict and plan the progression of the battle, you know, based on who's going when, to decide what you want to do, where you want to maneuver your characters. It's very handy. And another little thing it does is every time you go to try to attack an enemy, or heal an ally for that matter, you're given both a damage estimate and a probability of success. And I think a few other games have done that kind of thing, but this is the first one that I've played that does it, and it was just really cool to have that, I thought. You know, if you're really careful and OCD about the way you plan your battles, and I kind of am, you know, it offers you as much control over the progression of battle and opportunity to be careful and really plan. So that's great. That's a great thing for fastidious people like me. I have to talk about the maps in the battle system. The maps are really pretty good. They're big. Like, they start kind of small in the beginning of the game, but they get really big as you go on. We're talking like, I'd say 20 by 20, say maybe even 30 by 30 grid maps that you can traverse and maneuver your characters around. And it just, you know, having maps that big, it offers a lot of variety in the way the battle can unfold, because your characters have ranges for their attacks and magic, and it just gives more places you can hide certain characters, or pick and choose where you want to divide your party up and stuff. It was really great to have those big maps. There's also a good amount of varied terrain in them too, like there's different elevations. There are different elevations that you can encounter, and having high ground will be an advantage. And sometimes if characters are separated by too much elevation, like if your party's up on a mountain and your enemies are all down in a little valley, you obviously can't hit them, even if you're you know, horizontally very close, because you're too high up. So that's kind of neat having that sort of thing. There's also just a good amount of deep strategy based on the abilities you can use. Each character has unique abilities in battle. No two characters are going to really do the same thing. And there's a good system of special moves that, like, they're called flash drives in this game, that sort of build up throughout the battle, kind of like a limit break sort of in Final Fantasy. And some of them can like play off each other, like a few characters can cooperate and use special flash drive moves that are really powerful and really cool to see. They have little animations and illustrations that'll pop up when they are executed, and just a lot of neat little touches that make battle always refreshing. And you have a lot of characters to choose from, and you can bring up to 8 maximum into battle, so there's a degree of customization just in terms of who you want to take into battle, who your favorites are, and that kind of offsets the simplicity of not being able to change classes for each character. You know, each character has a pretty static class unless it changes throughout the course of the game, which happens in at least a couple instances. The other thing that I'll go into about gameplay is the intermissions, which are kind of like the way you build the relationships with characters in this game. And these are little sessions you can have. You pick a character who participated in each battle to talk with them at the end of the battle. And what happens is you get, you know, the character will say something to you, and you'll have like 3 options of responses to make to them back. And the way it works is each of these responses will either, you know, they'll have a different effect on the character. One will improve your relationship with them the most, one will be kind of middle, typically, and then there'll be one, usually, that that character just does not like, that kind of alienates them from you. And it's kind of a nifty little system to have in place. You get some amusing things said by these characters depending on what you say to them, and some of it's a little risque, some of it's a little, it's just funny. A lot of it's just really funny stuff. One thing I'll say though is that it's pretty challenging, kind of infuriatingly challenging to max out your relationship with the characters. And the reason for that is really explained by a little math, quite simply. If you do the basic probability calculation, you'll find out that because there are 3 different choices for a total of 10 different intermissions for each given character, that means there are 3 to the 10th power total paths of choices you can make for one character in terms of, you know, what response you give to them each time you have an intermission, and that totals 59,049 choice paths for one character. And I ended up maxing out one relationship with one character in my playthrough, and some of my work for that you can see written out right here. So yeah, that took me, I don't know, that took me probably a couple days just of trial and error, obsessively trying out different responses and seeing how they seemed to affect the character. And I finally got the responses to all work without using any guides. I never used any guides when I played through this game. It's frustrating as it got sometimes doing this intermission stuff. And yeah, you can pour a lot of hours fruitlessly sometimes into doing that stuff. So if you're really obsessed about maxing out your character relationships, it could be a little frustrating if you don't want to use a guide, because you have something against guides, as I do. But in the end, it's not a real necessary thing to do. It turns out that if you just mostly max out each character, you're treated to a special kind of a conversation with them at the end of these 10 intermissions. And the other reward you'll get is they'll give you, the characters will give you little gifts, little items typically that help you in battle, if you give them favorable responses. And so, yeah, overall the intermission thing was good. You just do have to be aware, though, and I didn't know this until I looked at it in the manual. You have to be aware that once you make these responses, and once you have these 10 intermissions with one character, whatever level their affinity is at with you is frozen at that level, and you won't have any other opportunities to sort of heighten your relationship any further with them. So you just have to be careful about that as you go forward in this game. Something to be aware of if you're a new player. From here I'll go into visuals. So as you can see, from the cover, it's got very well drawn anime style. This game came out in like 2007, and it really looks exactly like I would expect an anime from that time to look. Like, I've seen anime that have come out around 2007, and the characters are drawn pretty much exactly like the Luminous Arc characters are. And I like it. I think it's really good. I think it's well done. Yeah, the characters also have just very detailed battle sprites. This is aside from, those anime icons that come up in the dialogue. Yeah, the battle sprites are very well done. Lots of detail. They have cute little animations that they'll have in battle, so that was really cool to see on my little DS Lite screen. And other things about the visuals, not a ton to report, but the backgrounds, pre-rendered backgrounds, looked beautiful. Lots of nice scenery to look at in cutscenes, and the battle maps looked pretty good too. They didn't look too bad. Yeah, just real emotive character illustrations are probably the most memorable thing about the visuals. And also, as well, the overworld is pretty. I thought the overworld was pretty. It looked nice, kind of very atmospheric, and yeah, the overworld looked cool. Audio, I guess I'll go into to kind of get into wrapping things up here. Now this is something that was a really pleasant surprise for me. Luminous Arc is a DS game, but it is voice acted, and it's got a lot of voice acting. Like, there's a lot of voice acting backed into this game for all sorts of different characters, for a lot of different scenes. Occasionally there'll be some scenes that aren't voiced, but a really good amount of them are. Like, probably something like 30% of the major scenes, story scenes, are voiced. And there are a lot of dialogue scenes, so that actually adds up to quite a bit of voice acting you hear throughout the game. And the voice actors all around are phenomenal. I mean, I was really blown away by their performance, and yeah, each voice fit each character just perfectly, and each voice actor or actress really imbued a lot of the personality that comes through in these characters, and it was part of what made the characters so excellent, honestly. Yeah, just terrific voice acting throughout the whole thing. I can't think of a bad thing to say about the voice acting. It was just really great for all the characters. Some of them were especially standout performances, but I'll let you discover that for yourself if you want to play this game. As far as music goes, there wasn't really anything too stand out in terms of music. Kind of a lot of tracks that just stood in the background nicely and weren't too intrusive. but overall solid. I mean, just about all the tracks were at least very solid, you know, maybe a bit above average, I would say. You know, it's they're good arrangements, and there's some good instrumentation, pretty typical orchestral kind of stuff generally. And yeah, there were a few tracks though that were really good that came up here and there that were just really nice and made me kind of wonder how the sound was coming out of my DS speakers. So yeah, audio was overall plus, I thought. And also, I just have to say, the opening sequence of this game, the intro, when you start the thing up before you get to the press start screen, that is like essentially an anime intro. Like, there's a song, you know, song playing and everything, full animation, and it was something that really floored me, honestly, when I started this game up, because you know, when I was a kid, I played, you know, I just had Game Boy, and having something like animated anime sequences in a little handheld game system just is awesome to me even now. And yeah, it was just really well done, that intro. I just wanted to make a note of that because that was impressive, and it was awesome to watch all the characters in the game have that animation. One other last note I have to make a note of, is once you finish the main game, there is a kind of optional post-game challenge that you can do, and I went ahead and did this, and I'll just say this: I finished the main game at like I don't know, around 30 hours, and I was taking my time, you know, talking to everybody, looking into all the sort of background of this game world that you can explore as I played through. I made sure to get the most out of it I could. So 30 hours to just play through the regular game. And to do this end of game challenge, it added on a full 20 hours for me. I was sitting at 50 hours by the end of it, and it's kind of like a dungeon, actually the only proper dungeon in the whole game, really, because otherwise you're just going through individual battles. But yeah, this end of the game challenge is by far the most challenging battle experience you'll get in the game. I had to grind my way through it, grind as I go, sort of. And it was a vigorous challenge. I'll just leave it at that. And the reward for it is, well, basically the reward for it is just it's kind of mainly just the satisfaction of having completed something so difficult. And it was satisfying, I'll say that. But yeah, I kind of just spent 3 days letting this game devour my soul to finish that last challenge, and it took a lot out of me. But the challenge is there if you want it, and you can pursue it if you want it, and it's good. It's good that it's there. As brutal and grueling as it can be, it's good that they have something like that built into the game, because the battle system is really strong, and I have to admit, it was pretty fun, even though it was so challenging. Yeah, overall the difficulty of the game is just perfect, I would say, because I felt myself being challenged pretty much as I went through the game. Just talking about the regular plot line and even a few regular, like, sort of random encounter battles you can get into offer a good amount of challenge, and it makes it more fun to have to plot and plan your strategy, and more rewarding when you win as well, because you know, doing something easy is just there's not a lot of reward in that. So overall for Luminous Arc, I have to say it's got great humor mixed with some fantasy drama, and done definitely in a anime style, and for anybody who is really into JRPGs or really into anime, you know, or just really likes tactical strategy based gameplay, or for any mix of those things, I would highly recommend checking out Luminous Arc. It's a solid game, and my experience with it was totally positive. So, peace out.